The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista. Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Alex Fisher. We begin with your 17 Crime Watch. Still no arrest this morning after a juvenile was wounded in a shooting yesterday in East Bakersfield. Deputies were called to Pioneer Drive near Sterling Road around 4 p.m. When they arrived, deputies conducted an investigation and learned the victim had been shot in the stomach and was already at the hospital. The Kern County Sheriff's Office says the juvenile is stable. Anyone with information is asked to call KCSO at 861-3110.
Now to an update on the officer-involved shooting in McFarland on New Year's Day. The police dog at the center of the shooting was hit multiple times, but is expected to survive. Police fired at least 30 shots at the suspect, Eddie Figueroa, and he's expected to live as well. 17's Marco Torres has the latest.
New details from Delano police officer Juan Ortiz about police canine Axel, who was wounded in the shootout, is now stable. Ortiz says Axel was shot multiple times in the torso, but is stable and is expected to recover. The McFarland Police Department still continues to avoid giving any statement or answer questions. They have not answered after repeated phone calls. Now here's what we know what happened on that night. It was a high-risk car stop after a car chase. We know that from a statement by the Delano Police Department. The McFarland Police Department offered no statement and didn't answer repeated phone calls. But viewer video and interviews with neighbors gives a glimpse into what happened. We warn you, the video is disturbing. Residents say McFarland Police Department stopped the car, but the driver refused to get out. Apparently, that's when McFarland Police Department called the Delano Police Department at about 8:30 p.m. and asked for the Delano Canine Unit to come to the scene. We were told by Officer Ortiz only Axel and his handler were sent from Delano Police Department.
Hey, that fool's not gonna get out with all those straps.
A crowd gathered as the standoff continued. In the video, you can hear the bystanders shouting at the suspect to surrender.
Just give up, hey, your familia's right here, dog. They don't need to see that. Come on.
But ultimately, the dog is released. Just as the dog reaches the car, you can hear a bystander shout. Then, you hear the barrage of gunfire. We know that the suspect survived the barrage of gunfire and is now expected in court tomorrow. In a second video, although the quality is poor, you can see the Delano police SUV race Axel to the hospital. You can also see officers pull the suspect out of his car and secure him to the ground. And you can see one officer pick a gun off the street near where the suspect lies. You can see the officer put the gun on the hood of the police car.
Marco Torres, 17 News. And this morning, we're still working to get answers about what happened. Why was the suspect stopped? No one will say. But there are many more questions than answers about this shooting. We'll continue to ask McFarland Police Department and keep you up to date.
17 News is your local election headquarters. After weeks of saying he hadn't made up his mind yet, on the first Monday of 2022, Supervisor Mike Maggard announced he won't seek a fifth term on Kern's Board of Supervisors. The District 3 supervisor announced yesterday he'll step down, writing, quote, "It is important that I spend more time with my children and grandchildren in the years ahead." The announcement confirms weeks of reporting by 17 News that two candidates emerged for the seat last month, despite Maggard's claim he hadn't decided whether to run. Maggard's Chief of Staff Jeff Flores and retired CHP Assistant Chief Brian Smith are expected to announce official bids sometime soon. We'll be watching to see who declares first and how that could impact the election.
County supervisors, meantime, are preparing for a new era in local politics with the election of Zach Scrivener as the new chairman. Scrivener has overseen the 2nd District since 2010, representing areas of southeast Bakersfield, Tehachapi, California City, and other areas in eastern Kern County. Scrivener replaces outgoing chairman Philip Peters, who serves the 1st District. His first meeting as chairman will be held later this morning.
And now to one of our signature issues here at 17. Pedestrian safety. Less than 3 weeks after the city and county leaders called on the California Department of Transportation to improve pedestrian safety on Union Avenue in Bakersfield, Caltrans is signaling they're ready to move. The executive director of the Kern Council of Government says Caltrans informed him just yesterday that they've agreed to launch a comprehensive project to reduce pedestrian deaths and injuries from vehicle accidents.
What they're going to propose is commonly known as a road diet, where they take away some lanes, reduce the speeds of the vehicles, make it much more comfortable for bicycles and pedestrians, and won't guarantee that people won't run across the road in the middle of the night, but if a pedestrian or a bicyclist gets hit by a car doing 25 miles an hour, it's much less likely to be fatal than if they're hit by a car doing 45 miles an hour.
Complete details on the Union Avenue Pedestrian Safety Improvement Project will be released during a meeting with Caltrans and local officials on January 28th.
The California Highway Patrol conducted their statewide maximum enforcement period over the holiday weekend, and locally, the Bakersfield area CHP arrested 9 people for driving under the influence. CHP says they also investigated no fatality crashes. During the previous New Year's Day maximum enforcement period, 56 people were killed in crashes in California, and CHP officers made more than 700 arrests for driving under the influence throughout the state.
Meantime, if you noticed some commotion yesterday afternoon at the Chase Bank on Stockdale Highway after a vehicle crashed through the window into the bank. Check this out. It happened just after 1 p.m. at the Chase on Stockdale Highway and California Avenue. Bakersfield police responded to the scene. We've reached out to them for more information, but so far all we know is that they described simply a traffic accident. We'll update you as soon as we learn more.
From our 17 follow-up file this morning, and what sheriff's officials described as a portion of the stolen Buck Owens guitar has been located. KCSO says part of the guitar was found on Friday in an abandoned building in downtown Bakersfield. The police department received a tip that led to the building on O Street and notified the sheriff's office. The guitar was stolen 4 days earlier from the Buck Owens post office on Minner Avenue in Oildale. No arrests have been made. The U.S. Postal Inspection Service is offering a reward of up to $10,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of whoever is responsible. If you know anything, you're asked to call the sheriff's office at 861-3110 or secret witness at 322-4040. 32 is our time now, and coronavirus is thriving once again in Kern County following a wave of new infections after Christmas. But there is some good news as of now. More than 3,000 new infections were reported in the past week, according to Public Health. And although it may seem like an overwhelming number, it's important to look at when those people tested positive. Here's a look at the pandemic in Kern County, and you can see the 3 solid waves. The last wave of infections has not declined as quickly as the other 2. Health officials say there are a few reasons for that, including a low vaccination rate in Kern County and not as many people wearing masks when going out and about. It all allowed the highly contagious Delta variant to spread and infect more people, eventually leading to nearly 500 more people in Kern County dying to COVID-19. So where are we now? Well, Omicron hasn't been confirmed in Kern County, but there is a spike in cases. You can see that on the right hand of your screen. Nearly 700 people alone tested positive for the virus 2 days after Christmas. However, the good news is we're seeing a decline in hospitalizations. We're also seeing an increase in vaccinations. Nearly 50% of Kern's population is considered fully vaccinated. Although we're trending in the right direction, it is lower than the state and national average, and health officials say we're a ways away from solid protection as a community. A little more than a quarter of people vaccinated have received a booster. As we head into the new year, there are still many questions we have to ask, including, is Omicron in Kern County and the reason why we're seeing a spike? Will Kern County's hospitals be spared by Omicron despite a low vaccination rate? These are questions only time can answer. Meantime, as we begin a new year, we can't ignore the fact that 2021 was the deadliest year on record. More than 7,600 people died last year, and health officials are still counting. It was a grim year, filled with a record number of pedestrian fatalities, near record number of homicides, and a significant increase in fentanyl deaths. But the driving force behind Kern's deadliest days? COVID-19. More than 1,000 people in Kern County died of the virus last year. That's nearly 60% of the pandemic's death toll. Earlier this year, I examined the astounding number of deaths during the first year of the pandemic. I looked at every death certificate and tracked the trends. You can watch my full report on Kern's deadliest days on our website, kget.com.
Today, President Biden meets with his COVID response team. Americans are seeking guidance on testing and isolation periods to help plan their return to work or kids getting back to school. Expanded vaccine booster access may soon offer more protection in the classroom as schools struggle to reopen. NBC's Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Good morning, Maddie. School districts across the country are instituting a patchwork of policies, from testing to masks and keeping kids in pods, trying to keep their doors open, while several large districts are starting the year with remote learning.
President Biden meeting with his COVID advisors today on the federal response to the Omicron variant as the U.S. surpassed 56 million COVID cases just one day after hitting the 55 million mark.
So this is a very fast-moving wave of infection.
The sheer number of cases is increasing hospitalizations, but with mounting evidence Omicron infections are less severe, medical experts are hoping for a silver lining.
If there are future variants, that they will impact us less because we have so much immunity in our population.
But that doesn't ease the challenges now as school districts struggle to reopen after winter break, with COVID sidelining large numbers of staff and tests still hard to come by. Some sites closing early after running out of supplies.
This is very frustrating because it says 8 to 4 and we're trying to get our children tested for school.
More vaccine protection in schools is on the way, with the FDA authorizing Pfizer booster shots for kids aged 12 to 15, 5 months after their second dose. Also allowing third doses for some 5 to 11-year-olds with compromised immune systems. The CDC is expected to sign off tomorrow and may also update its guidance to recommend retesting after the shortened 5-day isolation period amid heavy criticism.
We're seeing record numbers of children hospitalized with COVID, but it's unclear if severe cases in kids are on the rise or if it's just a product of the overall number of infections. And at least some of those cases are among children being treated for other conditions who happen to test positive for the virus. In Washington, Alice Barr, 17 News.
5:37 is our time now, and in education news this morning, state lawmakers have rolled out a proposal to boost funding for K-12 schools across California. Funding would be based on annual enrollment instead of average daily attendance. As state leaders discuss how to spend California's budget surplus, some say education needs to be a priority.
And with the pandemic highlighting the needs across the board in our school districts, clearly districts that have been challenged face more challenges. Clearly, the impact on our students' wellness has increased, and this is the time to increase education funding. This is a time for K-12 to be front and center in the budget conversation going forward.
The proposal would increase statewide school funding by $3 billion.
The flames have been out for months, but the French fire continues to affect the Kern River Valley.
Yeah, when the fire tore through, structures fell, but hazardous materials remained. And now Kern County Public Health wants to make sure those materials are safely removed. 17's Chris Burton joins us in studio this morning with more. Chris?
Yeah, Alex, according to state estimates, around 30 structures were deemed lost to the French fire, and lurking in the ash and rubble of those buildings are particles that could taint our land and waterways, posing a threat to public health.
So a lot of structures, especially if they predate 1970, can contain lead, they contain asbestos, and once that structure is damaged, as it would be during the wildfire, then you can have those particles spread.
Kern County Public Health and state officials have teamed up to organize a debris removal program aimed at safely cleaning up these burn sites. Assistance comes at no cost to those who lost qualifying structures. To use the program, landowners must submit a form allowing fire officials to perform cleanup on their land. That form must be turned in by January 15th. More information can be found on the KCPH website, kernpublichealth.com. Now, KCPH submitted a resolution now approved to the Board of Supervisors requesting that the French fire state of emergency be extended through the month of January. That state emergency is what allows our county to request those cleanup resources from the state. Rutledge says if all goes according to plan, cleanup could be completed in a couple of months. In studio, Chris Burton, 17 News.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.